The world holds its breath. A single spark now could ignite a global firestorm. We stand at a precipice in early 2026, a moment defined not by one crisis, but by many. Wars burn hot in the Middle East. Wars burn hot in Eastern Europe. Great powers circle each other with growing suspicion. These are not isolated events. They are interconnected tremors shaking the very foundations of the global economy: trade, energy, financial stability. This is the story of how a year of conflict could unravel decades of progress. What it means: the price of your food, the security of your job, the future of your family. This is not a distant problem. It is a clear and present danger. The machinery of the global economy is vast and complex, but it is also surprisingly fragile. It depends on the free flow of goods and energy through critical arteries. When those arteries are squeezed, the pressure builds everywhere at once. The conflict that began on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched major strikes on Iran, it was not just a regional escalation, it was a shockwave that was instantly felt in every major capital, from Washington to Beijing. The world is watching to see if this is the start of a contained conflict, or the beginning of a much larger and far more costly global breakdown. The cost is already being counted. It is counted in the price of oil, which has surged by more than 25% since the strikes began. It is counted in the rising costs of shipping and insurance, as vessels avoid the world's most critical waterway. It is counted in the anxious meetings of central bankers who now face an impossible choice between fighting inflation and preventing a recession. And it is counted in human lives, with over 1,255 already lost in Iran and at least 13 in Israel. This is the new reality of 2026, a reality where military actions in one corner of the world can dictate the economic fortunes of another, thousands of miles away. The risks are compounding. While the world's attention is fixed on the Middle East, the brutal war in Ukraine grinds on, crippling a nation and destabilizing an entire continent's energy supply. Russia's war economy is showing deep signs of strain, forcing its leaders to take drastic measures to fund their campaign. These conflicts are not happening in a vacuum. They are layered on top of a fragile post-pandemic recovery, creating a perfect storm of geopolitical risk and economic vulnerability. Energy is the lifeblood of the modern world. Oil and gas do not just fuel our cars or heat our homes. They power the factories that build our goods. They power the tractors that harvest our food. They power the ships that carry it all across the oceans. When the price of energy rises, the cost of nearly everything else follows. The conflict in the Middle East has struck at the heart of this system, creating a shock now radiating through every link in the global supply chain. Oil surged to over $119 per barrel. That surge is not just a number on a trader's screen. It is a tax on the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical energy choke point. There is no easy alternative. Around 1/5 of global oil passes through this narrow strait every day. Its disruption is a catastrophic failure point. When attacks make the route impassable, that oil doesn't find another path. Much of it stays in the ground or in tankers that cannot move. About 1/5 of global crude and gas supply has been suspended. An unprecedented shock. Countries are forced to draw down strategic reserves, but those reserves are finite. The energy shock transmits rapidly through the economy. First, you see it at the gas pump and on utility bills. Secondary effects are just as powerful. Higher fuel costs raise transportation expenses for every company. Global shipping lines and local delivery services. These costs get passed to consumers. Factories pay more to run their machines. Food prices rise too. Fertilizer is energy intensive, and farm equipment runs on diesel. A regional conflict turns into a global inflation crisis. A severe energy shock does not stay contained. It sets off a chain reaction, a series of economic dominoes that fall one after another, leading toward a global crisis. The first domino to fall is inflation. As energy prices skyrocket, the cost of living surges. We are already seeing the forecasts. In the European Union, consumer price inflation could jump by more than a full percentage point. In the United States, inflation was on a path toward a manageable 2.4%, but could now climb back to 3% by the end of the year. These numbers may seem small, but they represent billions of dollars in lost purchasing power for ordinary families. The second domino is the reaction of central banks. Institutions like the U.S. Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank had been preparing to cut interest rates in 2026. They believed inflation was finally under control. The oil shock has shattered that assumption. Now, they face a terrible dilemma. If they cut rates to stimulate a slowing economy, they risk letting inflation run wild. If they hold rates high, or even raise them further, they risk choking off economic growth entirely and triggering a deep recession. This is the classic recipe for stagflation, stagnant growth and high inflation that plagued the 1970s. The third domino is the global supply chain. The system is already under immense pressure. The crisis in the Strait of Hormuz means energy flows are slowing, but the effects are broader. We are seeing rice exports stuck at Indian ports because of shipping uncertainties. Fertilizer prices are spiking, threatening future harvests. The cost of moving any product is rising, and the reliability of its arrival is falling. This is not just a regional shipping problem. It is a global supply chain crisis unfolding in real time. The final domino is financial market stability. As economic growth slows and interest rates remain high, the risk of corporate defaults increases, and even banking crises become more likely. Businesses that borrowed heavily when rates were low now face a crushing debt burden. Investors sell off risky assets. Banks tighten lending. This creates a vicious cycle, pulling the global economy down into a recession that becomes harder to escape. Global economic crises are not abstract events. They are felt intimately. Kitchens, workplaces, communities around the world. The first and most direct impact is on the cost of living. When energy prices rise, when food prices rise, family budgets are squeezed thin. The extra money spent on filling up the car or heating the home is money that cannot be spent elsewhere. Clothes, repairs, saving for the future. For families living paycheck to paycheck, a sustained price shock is not an inconvenience. It is a disaster. It forces impossible choices. Food, medicine, paying the rent, keeping the lights on. When the economy slows, businesses suffer. Factories reduce production, high energy costs, broken supply chains. Retail stores see fewer customers. People cut back on spending. Construction is delayed. All of this leads to layoffs and hiring freezes. The uncertainty makes employers hesitant to expand. For those who lose their jobs, finding new work is difficult. High inflation is a silent thief. It eats away at purchasing power. Pensions look insufficient. Investment accounts fall. Nearing retirement, forced to work longer or accept a lower standard of living. Rising rates make mortgages harder. The pain is not distributed equally. The crisis hits the most vulnerable hardest. Import-dependent nations face higher costs and a stronger dollar. This can lead to social unrest and political instability. Millions pushed back into poverty, erasing hard-won progress. This is the human cost of a global economic breakdown. In the worst-case scenario, the sparks of 2026 ignite a raging fire. Diplomats fail. Military commanders take charge. The conflict between Iran and the U.S.-Israeli coalition expands across the Middle East. Iran, feeling its existence is threatened, unleashes its full arsenal of asymmetric warfare. Missile attacks on oil facilities become commonplace. Drone attacks on oil facilities become commonplace. The Strait of Hormuz becomes a permanent war zone. Naval mines litter shipping lanes. Frequent attacks effectively shut it down for all commercial traffic. The world is suddenly and violently cut off from a fifth of its oil supply. There is no immediate replacement. The economic consequences are swift and brutal. Oil prices would explode, surging past $150 per barrel, perhaps even touching $200. This is an energy shock not seen in 50 years. Global inflation re-accelerates at a terrifying pace, reaching double digits in many developed economies. Central banks are forced to raise interest rates dramatically, slamming the brakes on the global economy. The world plunges into a deep and prolonged recession. Supply chains fracture. Shortages spread. Unemployment soars. Stock markets crash, wiping out trillions, gutting pension funds. Political instability rises. International cooperation evaporates, replaced by an every nation for itself struggle for resources. The global order crumbles, ushering in a dangerous era of rivalry and confrontation. Really. There is another path. It is a difficult path, requiring courage and foresight, but it leads away from the abyss. In this alternative future, the world's leaders pull back from the brink. Back-channel negotiations, facilitated by neutral powers, open a line of communication: Iran, the West. While the core issues remain unresolved, all sides recognize that a wider war would be an economic suicide pact. A fragile, unstated agreement is reached to de-escalate attacks on commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Naval patrols from a coalition of nations, China, India, help secure the waterway. With the immediate threat reduced, a sense of cautious calm returns to energy markets. Oil prices, while still elevated, stabilize around 90 to 100 per barrel. This gives the global economy breathing room. The coordinated release of strategic petroleum reserves helps bridge the supply gap. The flow of oil does not return to normal immediately, but the blockade is broken. The worst-case energy shock is averted. This stability allows central banks to navigate their dilemma more skillfully. With inflationary pressure easing, they can pause hikes and hold rates at restrictive levels, cooling the economy without forcing a deep recession. The threat of stagflation recedes. Businesses and consumers, still facing high costs, are no longer staring into the abyss. Confidence slowly returns. Investments are cautiously reconsidered. The global recession is avoided, though growth remains sluggish. This does not mean a return to the world before the crisis. Conflicts continue to simmer. The world has been reminded of its fragility, a powerful wake-up call. Governments accelerate energy diversification, renewables, and more resilient supply chains. A new emphasis is placed on diplomacy and conflict resolution. The world learns a hard lesson from its near-death experience in 2026 and builds a foundation for a more stable, if more cautious, future. We are now at a crucial crossroads. The events of early 2026 have exposed deep fault lines beneath our globalized world. Interconnected prosperity for decades has now revealed a dark vulnerability. Shocks that spread with terrifying speed. The conflict in Iran, the conflict in Ukraine, are not just regional wars. They are tests of global resilience, the price of oil, the stability of supply chains, the health of the world economy, are all hanging in the balance. Decisions in the coming weeks and months will matter. The power to avert the worst lies with governments and international institutions. First priority, de-escalation. Use every diplomatic channel to contain conflict and protect global trade arteries, especially the Strait of Hormuz. Governments must cushion the blow, targeted support for low-income households facing high energy and food prices. Use strategic reserves wisely. Resist protectionism. Businesses must diversify supply chains and stress-test operations. Individuals must practice financial prudence, build a savings cushion, and stay aware. Distant conflicts affect daily life. This is not someone else's problem. In a globalized world, a crisis anywhere becomes a crisis everywhere. The ultimate question remains: Is 2026 a temporary storm that will pass? Or the start of a new, more dangerous era? Great power conflict, fractured supply chains, persistent economic instability. The path forward will decide. Choose diplomacy over conflict. Choose cooperation over rivalry. Choose foresight over short-term political gain. The world is watching. The stakes could not be higher. Will we rise to the challenge, or will we allow the dominoes to fall?